All right, so I'm looking at DaVinci Resolve, and the purpose of this demo is to create just a short podcast. I'm not making a professional video for this demonstration. Instead, I'm just playing around with the tools so that you can better understand how mixing works within the software. And we're going to look specifically at this tab down here, the little music note. It is referred to as Fairlight, and you can access that as well under the pull down here for workspace, switch to page Fairlight. And this is their audio engineering software that's just built into DaVinci for free. So to get things going, I'm just going to load up some footage. I've downloaded some stuff off the internet that I want to play around with today. And this video happens to have both video and audio. And I can see that clearly by these two icons down here below the footage. We've looked at this before, but if all I wanted to bring down onto my timeline is the video, because I don't want to hear the dialogue or the music that's in this video, I can just drag this icon down like that. And that didn't bring the audio with it. Now from my monitor up here, if I dragged the video from just the middle, it's going to bring both the video and the audio down onto that timeline. Now I've got some stuff going on here from an earlier. Let me create a brand new timeline. Yeah, let's do that. Cool. So once more, open up my video footage, I drag it down onto the timeline, and you'll see both the video and the audio comes down together. And as you've seen in the past, if I drag the thin black line up, I get to see my footage. But if I click and drag this thin black line down, I get to see the wave form. Now often you'll hear people say the wave or the waveform. They're interchangeable, but that's what we're visualizing here. Now there's two very important properties to audio. You have the frequency, and the frequency relates directly to how low the pitch is or how high the pitch is. So that's like on a piano on the far left-hand side. If you press a key on a piano, you get a low note, and way up high on the right side of the piano, you press another key and you get a high note, and that's the frequency. Now, how hard you push that key makes it either quiet or loud, and that's the amplitude, or referred to often in software, that's the volume. And what we get to see as visualization along this waveform in the software is a helpful visualization of how loud this sound is. So this is helping us to visualize the amplitude or the volume. Now, if I don't want to hear the sound that comes with this video, and I just dragged it down and I didn't isolate it, I have some options here to mute the track. And if it's muted and you export the video, it will not be heard. So if you want to leave this here as reference audio, you can. Maybe you want to use other music as another track, as well as your dialogue that we're going to see here being recorded in a moment. So I'm just going to leave that in. Maybe come back to it in a little while, because I know that there's a little bit of dialogue at the very beginning of this. Now, I know in this video here, and this was another clip that I downloaded from YouTube, that there's an hour of music from the Star Wars franchise. So I'm just going to turn up my volume a little bit and press play. Cool. Now this sequence of video down here, it has Anakin Skywalker battling with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And there is a special song that was written by John Williams, the composer of this soundtrack. Every character in the Star Wars saga actually has their own music. And I know that this music from this 1 hour of Star Wars music is sitting here in the first maybe 5 minutes of this clip. This is an hour long. So I'm using my in and out points. So remember, you can tap I and O to select sections of video and audio to bring down onto your timeline. So way at the beginning, I know I'm going to tap the I key for the in point. That's the music that I want to hear while I'm watching this footage down on my timeline. So from my monitor, I can carefully pull down just the audio from this video clip. So I'm going to just shrink down my out point. So this is the only region, this tiny little region here from this hour of footage. I'm going to just grab this one section of music and drag it down onto my timeline here into audio 2. Now you got to be careful when you're doing this because it just jumped away from what I currently had selected in my monitor to the footage down here when I clicked on that clip. So once more, this is my source footage. So I got to double click on that and then carefully drag my audio down to the timeline. And I'm going to put it onto audio 2. Like so. Cool. So remember, audio 1 has been muted, so I'm not going to hear it. So now I'm going to hear in the background this A2 track. Let's hear what that sounds like. Perfect. That's what I want. Now, I know that at the beginning of all of this, there is a little bit of dialogue that I might want to hear. So let me mute this track and unmute this one and listen carefully at the beginning.
Not with me, then you're my enemy. Only a Sith.
Cool. So that might be what I want to start my video with so that I can hear a little bit of that dialogue. Now this is going to be tricky because this clip has music in it. So if I'm trying to mix music with music, well, that's going to create a cacophony of noise and it's not going to be all that great unless maybe I can mix this other track up just a little bit to make it disappear. Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to play around with it. I can visualize that the content in this clip here, this audio recording, it's very quiet right now. This is really loud. So I might want to hear this section while this dialogue is happening. And it's going to end somewhere around here.
You will try.
You will try. Then I'm going to ask the software to drop this sound out. So get rid of this. Now, if you look carefully on the clip, there's this little white line. And when I drag it up and down, it will increase and decrease the amplitude or the volume of my clip. And it drags all the way down to the floor, all the way up to the top. Now we got to be careful when we're using this because if you look on the right side of my screen, the waveform is starting to cover the top line. It's starting to bleed out over the top of this region. We're going to start to suffer what's referred to as digital clipping. and it starts to sound really noisy and not very good. So I'm just going to bring this up to about there so that this peak where my cursor is just touching the top. And my playhead is right where I want to edit this and drop out the sound. So up here where the inspector is, I got to turn my inspector on. I can click on audio, and there's an option for the volume to be animated. It can have keyframes. There's a couple of ways of doing this, but to start, I want to just look at it up here. I've currently increased the volume by 11, and you can type in numbers up here if you'd like, to be exact. But at this moment in time where my playhead is, I might want to make a keyframe. Remember that setting, DaVinci, and you'll see down here, there is now a little red dot. When I mouse over it, I can move it around. Maybe just a couple of frames after this keyframe, I'm going to decrease the volume. So let's see how to do that. Little power tip. When you're dealing with keyframes, you can use these little arrows to jump to the next keyframe. So down here, I could try to move my playhead to make it exactly on top of this one. Not an easy thing to do. So let me just use this little arrow button up here to jump to the keyframe. Jumps into place. I'm going to use my arrow key, my right arrow key, just to jump a couple of frames. I'm going to add another keyframe to my volume. And then I can cut it down to 0. I can drag it, wrong one, grab the right one. I might need to zoom in on this here. I'm going to grab that keyframe and I'm going to drag it all the way down. So this is literally fading out over time, and you can move it left and right, up and down, but you're creating a fade down to nothing. So I wanted to cut it right out, so I'm going to drag it down to the floor, to what it calls -100 decibels. And decibels is the unit of measure for how loud something is, its amplitude. So let's hear this.
We'll try. We'll try.
Awesome. Now if I unmute this track, now keep in mind, this is, like I said, this is not a professional video. I wouldn't be mixing together 2 tracks with music, but this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to unmute this track. So now it's going to play much louder than this content. And I'm going to rewind to the very beginning and see how this mixes together.
Not with me.
Now DaVinci might need a little moment to just fix up the mix. So you have to rewind maybe a couple times and hit play.
Not with me. Then you're my enemy.
Cool. This part here, I might choose to fade it in. So when you're zoomed in to an audio track and a video track, this little white tab pops up. I'm going to have this fade in from black on the video, and I'm also going to fade in my audio. Is there a question? No, I don't know what that sound was. No problem. All right. So by moving this little, and this is only at the beginning and the end of a clip, it's kind of a quick way to fade in things, whether it's both your audio and your video. And you can make this nice curve by grabbing this little dot here and making it a nice curve so that eases in. Let's hear that.
Then you're my enemy.
Now this is too loud, so I'm going to drag this line for no keyframes needed. I'm just going to bring this down.
With me. Then you're my enemy.
So I'm going to maybe start this where it says, then you're my enemy. If I wanted to create a keyframe here, without going all the way up to the inspector, I can press Option and click. Option, hold down the Option key. I think it's Alt on a PC, and just click, and then you can easily make keyframes on your audio timeline. Since I'm bringing this down to -100 decibels, this is now mute. This is useless. This isn't helping me, so I'm just going to turn that off. We'll see what this looks like. I'm going to fade it in over that period of time, fading from black and having it come in as soon as Anakin Skywalker speaks his dialogue. Let's hear that.
Then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I will do what I must.
You will try.
Cool. Be much better if I had this clip without any music in it and just dialogue. But that's impossible because I'd literally have to have the original mix. Now, once more, the purpose of this is for me to make a podcast-like experience. But I did this just to show you quickly how you can begin to do some audio engineering, some audio decision-making in terms of your volume very quickly down here on the timeline using keyframes. That's one way to do it. Now I'm going to mute this track because I don't actually need to hear that dialogue because I'm going to add my own in here in a second. I'm going to record my own voice. Now, you can record using your laptop microphone, but I would strongly encourage you all to, if you can, try to get your hands on a much better microphone, whether that's a pair of AirPods is better than your laptop computer. Maybe a Bluetooth pair of headphones is going to have a better microphone in it than what you have in your laptop. If you're in Thunder Bay and you can get to the library, grab one of these. Let me just share this for a second with y'all. I've got this microphone. It's a lavalier microphone, and you can take this out from the Pattison Library on the second floor of the Shunya building. And this just plugs in 1/8 inch into your cell phone if you're on location, or you can plug it directly into your laptop as a replacement. If you have an iPhone, you might have to get one of these dongles that jumps your lightning connection to 1/8 inch. I bought this from Best Buy for $10. Back to the demonstration. So get a good microphone. The better your microphone, the better the experience is going to be. The better the sound quality is going to be overall. And then when you plug that microphone into your computer, there's some things that you need to consider. On an Apple, I need to go to my system preferences. On a Mac, you would go to your control panel and check out your sound settings. And I'm going to make sure that my input device, I can switch from my output. That's my MacBook Pro speakers. The sound is coming out through those speakers. But my input is currently set to my external microphone, which is this lavalier that I'm wearing. And I can see my levels down here jumping. Now, the Mac does something very interesting. When I switch this to a much louder input, and you can probably hear me getting louder out there on Collaborate, it'll start to jump up all the way to 100%, and you'll start to hear digital clipping. You'll hear noise being created in this process. The Mac takes care of this and listens to me and is constantly changing my volume input. And it likes to sit around 65% for my voice. I'm not sure if Windows does that. So you have to be really mindful when you're recording to jump into your settings and play around with your input to make sure that you're getting roughly this jumping to about 70% of what your potential volume could be. Now you could be a quiet speaker who doesn't speak very loud, and then you need to crank it up a little bit, and then, or you're a very loud speaker and then you drag it down, and you get my point. You don't ever want it jumping to the maximum up here, or you're going to get noise. You're going to get a lot of noise. So because I did that little loud moment, this thing has jumped down on me, so I'm just going to be speaking now in my regular tone. And watch this very carefully. You want to set this up once, and maybe even just kind of leave it in the background so that you can jump back and play around with it. Because this is going to determine what the volume is coming into, what the amplitude is of your recording as it enters into the DaVinci Resolve software. So where to begin? I'm going to jump on over to the Fairlight page. So it's this little musical note down here. And as I'd mentioned before, this is a fully realized recording facility. At first blush, it doesn't look all that deep, but it is, and it can be used to record a rock and roll band. You could use it to record an entire orchestra if you have one at your disposal. The number of inputs that you have is dependent upon your audio interface. So you can buy these special devices that either plug in USB or Firewire, or it's the old system. And it's now up to you to define under the preferences of DaVinci Resolve what it is you want for your video and audio I/O, also known as your inputs and outputs. So this is under preferences. And you'll notice that by default, it just says, I'm going to use the system settings. Like, oh, okay. But you can jump down here and say, I would like to use the external microphone. Make sure that it's set to that if that's what you want to use. Or if you plug in maybe a Bluetooth microphone, AirPods, you'll see them in here as well, listed. But if they're being used by your system, and you'll see that in your system preferences, then that's what that means. Use the system settings. So my input device is going to be my external microphone, and my output device is going to be my speakers, as defined in my system settings. So that's my I/O. There's one other thing that I want to point out here while we're looking at the properties of the settings of DaVinci Resolve. There's this one option here. It's called control panels. And you'll notice that there are color grading panels and that there are consoles for Fairlight. Consoles look something like this. And I've got one opened up here in the background. So you've seen these before. Professional audio engineers, they often sit at these panels. Sometimes they have 8, 16, 32, 64. My cousin who works in LA and records for cinema, he sits at 92 track recording facilities. So they've got 92 of these little sliders. And what these sliders allow you to do is quickly change the volume of the track. And these things are smart enough that as you're recording your mix, as you slide them up and down, there's little motors inside that remember their position. There's cheaper ones that you can buy that aren't $4,000, that don't have that automation, that won't automatically slide the sliders up and down. But you're going to see these inside of DaVinci Resolve here. So you can buy these control panels and plug them in USB and mix using those control surfaces. So I just wanted to point out, here you can control your audio inputs and outputs. And if you have a control panel, you can turn that on as well. So let's jump into Fairlight. So I've got everything turned off right now, and I'm just seeing the tracks. What's awesome is that I can jump back here, and let's say I did, and I'm never going to use this track, this audio 2. Sorry, my audio 1. Let me just drop it down so I can see this. I'm going to change its name, and this is just reference audio. This is going to be my soundtrack. Always a good idea to name your tracks so that it's easier to find later on. If I grab this and I unlink it, clicking the little link button up here, I can now slide this audio over, and you'll notice when I go back to Fairlight, it's been slipped over. Let me just shrink this other clip down and zoom on into all this so we can see what's going on here. If I grab a audio clip in here and I slip it back to the beginning, well, you can imagine what's going to happen in my edit pane. Let me go back to edit or cut. It's been moved here. So it's just fantastic that I can make a decision in my edit world and then hop on over into my sound engineering world, and it's been changed there. And I don't have to leave DaVinci Resolve. I don't have to go to Audition from Premiere and do work there and then come back and then move it and then, oh geez, I got to go back to Audition. It's all done in one shot. I mute something here or unmute it here. I go back to the edit pane and it's muted here. I unmute it here, go back to Fairlight. It's unmuted there. It's awesome. It's so great. And I do want to point out that these little buttons here, we've got arm for record, solo, and mute. So if we don't want to hear a track, we can mute it. If we want to isolate a track, because maybe we have 9 or 10 or 50 of these, we can solo that track. So that's the only one we're going to hear. That's what the S is for, the solo. And this is when we're ready to record something. We can click the R and arm it for recording. So I want to record something now, and I want to do this sort of podcast style. I'm going to take the source footage and I'm going to change it. I'm going to make it unique, like we had talked about under fair use. So I'm going to do a little documentary about Anakin Skywalker. And bear with me on this. I'm going to be making up my dialogue as I go. So yeah, it might be a little bit nonsensical. If I want to see the waves, I have to carefully put my mouse cursor at the bottom of the track and I can pull it down. And there's lots and lots we can learn from just visualizing the amplitude of the wave. Very important that we get in there and we can actually see what's going on. If I want to see my footage, we got buttons up here. Well, we got the inspector, that one we know. So if I click on this, we can see that there's the same inspector information that we saw before. If it's got keyframes that we had created in our edit view, they're still there. Let me drop this down so we can see if our keyframes are still there. Nothing's changed. And if I want to start working on my video, pop open my mixer. Mixer is important because now there's those sliders that we saw from those control surfaces. Remember, back to this image here, got these sliders. Well, here they are over in DaVinci. So there's our mixer. I can turn on my meters. Meters are very important because now we can start to visualize the amplitude of our different tracks. We can see these jumping up and down as things are playing. And we never want our audio to clip above 0. Now it gets a little bit confusing, like why 0 dB? Well, that's considered to be parity, they call it, and that's where things start to clip. So it's loud right now, so I'm going to actually turn off my speakers. I'm just going to mute my speakers, and you want to do this from time to time. Mute it. And I'm just going to watch what's happening here in my meters over here. And it's showing me that track 2 is yellow. That means it's currently the one that's playing. Is reference still muted? Let me double check this here. I need to mute reference. Cool. And then press play. And then you can watch what's going on in that track. Now, if I ever get too loud, and this, my friends, is very bad. When you start to see your waveform clipping that much, you're pushing it too loud. It's okay to just touch it at 0. That's okay. But then we've kind of ruined what is going on over here. And we can achieve this same effect with compressors and push everything to be super loud. But let's be realistic here. Dynamics, which is the variation of volume and amplitude, is really the spice of life. It's the stuff that makes sound really attractive and really beautiful. Changing that audio volume over time. So we can visualize using our meters here what's going on. That's looking pretty good. We're not clipping at 0. We're seeing loudness over here. What our range is in our decibels. Yeah, we're getting a lot of good information out of this software. Awesome. So I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. I'm going to rewind and scrub to the very beginning of all of this. Now I want to look at recording in the software. So I need a new track. In order to do that, you just right click, add track, and you got to make a decision here. Do you want it to be mono? Like, do you want to hear the same thing in both left and right ears? Or stereo? There's 5.1 and 7.1. Incredible. So if you had 7 microphones, you could literally surround yourself with 7 microphones, plus 1 for bass, and you can create a 7.1 track with DaVinci for free. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to call this track here my dialogue. Now, when you click ARM for record, like I've told the system that I want to use my external microphone in the preferences, so if I hit ARM for record, which I need to do in order to record to this track, nothing's happening. It turns on and turns off. Well, that's because I need to bus in the microphone into this new track. Now you got to be careful, like the mixer can hide tracks from you. You can scroll left and right with a trackpad, or you can drag it out so you can see all of your tracks. Now right now under input it says there are none. There's no inputs. Wait a second, I set one up. Well, you set them up on a per track basis. So under no input, you click on that. What do you want to do? I want to input something. And then you get the option to pick what are you inputting from, my external microphone, And where are you sending this to? I could send it to my reference and write over existing audio data, or there's my soundtrack layer. Well, here's my dialogue. So I need to highlight the left and right channel for my dialogue and then hit patch. Back in the good old days, we used to have these chords, the same chord that you use for an electric guitar or a microphone. They're called patch chords. So the word comes from that old, that part of the discipline. So we patch this together, and then we see everything's highlighted, which means we're ready to go. And now we can turn on arm for record. Now, I'm going to make the common mistake. I'm going to turn my speakers back on. And I'm going to press arm for record. Do you hear what I hear? This is bad. Very bad. Feedback. So what's happening is the microphone is picking up what's coming out of my speakers and sending it back to the microphone, back to the speakers, back to the microphone, and it just goes back into this loop, and it gets louder and louder and louder infinitely until it starts to squeal. Like that. So we can either turn off the monitoring of our track, or the easiest thing to do, just mute your computer. Just mute. I don't want to hear anything coming out of my speakers. Now, if I need to hear what's going on in my video, for example, because I want that track to be included, then I would put on headphones and I would isolate the sound in my headphones so it wouldn't feed back into the microphone. So now that I have my speaker volume turned all the way down, just crank it down till I have no audio coming out of my speakers, I can hit arm for record, and there we go. Now we're starting to see levels jumping up here. If I turned my levels on up here, my meters, then I can also see a visualization of that jumping here. Now the general question is, what is a good sound recording level? There's mixed arguments for different amplitudes, for different volumes. I am personally a fan of trying to target a maximum of -5 and a minimum of -15. I'm getting a pretty healthy recording right now because the majority of my recording is happening in this yellow zone, which is basically saying, warning, you're starting to get too loud. And if I go too loud, it will get red, and that's saying we're starting to clip. We might eventually get to the 0 point and we might clip out on our signal. So with that all said and done, I can literally push the record button. Now I want to be able to see the video, which is going to be up here in the top right, and that's because I have my meters turned on. Turn my meters on. This will show me a preview of my video so I can discuss it while I'm recording. My soundtrack, may as well mute it because I don't need to hear anything. If it was important and I wanted to put on headphones, I could do that and then isolate the sound so I get no feedback. But there's no point in having these on. The other alternative, instead of just muting these two, is just to solo this one so it's all by itself. These two will never play if this one is soloed. So let's record. All I need to do now is press the record button here, and we're into it. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine, was told that his midichlorians were greater than any other Jedi in the history of the Jedi, and as a result, wanted to become a master. His master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, trained him well, but his hubris got to him, and in not too long, he was finding himself turning to the dark side. Yes, he became Darth Vader. So there's my little podcast. And I can see down here, when I drag this down now, I've got some recording. Now, I want to use my eyes as much as I'm using my ears. This is not, I'm going to turn off arm for record and turn off solo. This is not a lot of information. If I play it back, let me solo it and play it back. I'm going to look at the meters. It's not bad, actually. It's not bad at all. If I'm sitting between -25 and -5, -25 and 5, I'm a happy person. I'm very happy. Because I have the possibility now of, and I'm going to make this waveform real big, pumping up my amplitude by dragging this white line. And I'm looking at this point right here where it gets super loud, and I'm going to drag that up to just touch to allow it to clip just a little bit. Now, in the recording, I can also see in the quiet moments, there's noise. That is coming in from the fan noise of my computer. Another good reason to get a microphone off of your computer and away from your fans. There's some noise there. So if I play it back, I should hear this fan whir. It's going to be difficult to hear because that sound is already still playing because my computer is working really hard. Now I may as well save this project before I lose it. That's good news. All right. I'm going to turn off solo and just jump back to my edit page and press go. Might be a good idea to turn up my volume on my speakers now. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. All right. So I've got my soundtrack here. I've got my dialogue recorded here. So now I want to go through a process of starting to master this. I'm going to first mix it, and then I'm going to master it. It's actually not that hard at all to get really good quality sound out of DaVinci. I'm going to shrink this down just a bit and bring my soundtrack down like so. So the video starts off, bring up my meter so I can see the footage. The video starts off with a lot of music. And I'm actually going to let that melody play for a little while. Actually, I'm going to let this entire section play out before I start speaking. So now I can slip this over, which is awesome. So just let this play by itself.
Then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I'll do what I must.
I'm going to mute the reference, it's bothering me. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine, was told that his midichlorians were greater than any other Jedi in the history of the Jedi. All right, so not bad, but can be way, way better. First and foremost, I want to get rid of the noise that I know is coming in from my computer laptop, from my fan. So I'm going to turn on this interface here for my effects, and I'm just going to search for noise reduction. Just type in the first few letters even, and it'll pop up. And I'm just going to drag that down onto my dialogue clip. Now, word to the wise, if you're going to edit your audio later on and spread out your dialogue, apply your mastered effects first so that you only have to change the one file before you start cutting it into pieces, because then otherwise you're going to have to put this down onto each clip independently. Now, noise reduction, quite literally, auto speech mode. There's lots of settings in here that you can play with. You can select a region of the sound and ask it to learn the noise print, but auto speech mode just works. It's kind of wild, actually. And as a result, wanted to become a master. His master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, trained him well, but his hubris got to him. And in not too long, he was finding himself turning to the dark side. Cool. Now if I turn solo off for that track, and notice the music up here is starting to get to be the same volume as this down here. So, his master Obi-Wan Kenobi trained him well, but his hubris got to him. And so it's starting to stomp on, that's a term I use. It's starting to play louder than my dialogue. So I'm going to turn off the effects library here. Maybe I'll even turn off meters for now. Turn off mixer, so I've got a lot of workspace. And start looking at my waveform. Where can I fix it? It gets nice and quiet here, and then starts to get louder again. So I'm going to put a keyframe down here on the volume. So Option click. And I'm just going to lay a keyframe anywhere. Option click, or Alt and click. And then I can taper this off over time. And I'm just trying to keep this waveform at the same height all the way across. Now you'll notice it's done that to both the left and right channels, but you might sometimes need to look at the other channel to see there's a moment here where that gets really loud, so I might want to bring this one down just a little bit. And if you're finding that you're not getting a very good control over the keyframes here, don't forget Inspector, Audio, Volume, there's your keyframes. So you can jump along the timeline by clicking this little arrow key to the last keyframe in that sequence. Jump. Okay, come on. Jump, 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 jump. Why isn't it working? Click on the track. It should be jumping to these keyframes. There we go. It just needed to be kind of shicking around there. For some reason it doesn't want to jump back. That's a little bug. It'll go forward, but it won't go back. Strange. Very strange. But yeah, you can jump to the next keyframe and you can be very accurate by either dragging in the little box or dragging the slider, or you can punch in numbers. So 0.245, it'll round it up. But yeah, the goal is ultimately to get this to a point where it's nice and even along the bottom, because this moment here, and usually you're going to have to do what's referred to as ducking. So I'm going to duck the audio down here. So rarely do you have in, modern music these really quiet moments. That's more likely to be found in classical music like this piece. So if you're dealing with a piece of modern music and you want to duck it down just before this dialogue happens, add some keyframes, click and click, and then drag this down like so. Drag this back. Make a nice fade. So it'll fade down in volume while I start to speak. Let's hear it. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Bring that back more. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine. I don't know what I'm talking about there. But yeah, this is what we do. Now, if you had a control surface like this, you would be sliding these sliders up and down over time to manipulate your waveform. Without that, a keyboard and mouse or touch trackpad, this is how we do. This is how we do it. We duck our audio. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born... I'd slip this over just a little bit. Now, I've applied, if I look carefully with my inspector, to that clip some effects. So here we can gain access to them, and there's my noise reduction. If I don't like what the noise reduction is doing, I can turn down the amount of noise reduction that plugin or turn it up. So dry means the original recording without the effect applied. Wet is 100% of that effect being applied to the recording. So you can get in here and start to manipulate the properties of the effects. There's lots and lots of effects in here that you can use, like the de-esser, the de-hummer, the dialogue processor. That one's pretty nice. I'm going to drag that on to my dialogue and just choose one of the presets, male voice. It's got de-rumble, de-pop, de-ess, compress. And then use your ears. Solo the track and use your ears. Burn in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine. And don't forget this, so important, to look at your computer output volume. Like, I am increasing my volume because if you're making decisions when your volume's really low or really high, it's going to lead to bad things. I like to leave my output volume somewhere around 70%, because that's usually what people have their computers set to. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine. A little bit of an S sound on all of my sibilances, they're called. I'm going to drag the de-esser down. And you'll notice that these are your frequencies from 0 hertz all the way up to 88,000 or 8K, 8,000 hertz. And these are your decibels. So it's grabbing this one range and decreasing the volume. So this is an equalizer, actually. So let's hear what that sounds like. What a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores. And another classic multi-band compressor. You just stack these on top of each other. And our good friend does not worry about it at all. Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores. change the pitch. Turn myself into a chipmunk.
Was told that his metachlorians were greater than any other Jedi in the...
So silly. Deepen my voice.
Born in the sand-drenched...
So silly. So have fun with these. You know, I'd like to say that there's a right or wrong answer. But those that I just showed you are very commonly used. Vocal channel is nice. You can literally just drop down the EQ. And if you're starting to get carried away with plugins, you can go back to your inspector and get rid of them with the little trash button here. And you start layering them too much, your computer can slow down and you start to lose the original timbre.
What a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shore.
So I might want to get rid of pitch. So I'm just going to hit the garbage can on pitch. How's that sound?
Of Tatooine was told that his metachlorians were greater than...
And you can turn these on and off, like multi-band compressor or de-esser. I'm going to turn that off because I know that can be problematic.
Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine, was told that his metachlorians were greater than any other Jedi in the history of...
And now that I'm satisfied with it, I can go at it with my scissors tool and start to cut it. Now there should be a shortcut for that. On a Mac, it is Command B. So this moment in here
was told...
I might want to cut this out. So just Command B. Command B. Highlight that. Ripple. They don't have a ripple cut? Ripple cut. Where are you? Ripple cut. Interesting. Delete. Select tool. Yeah, I guess that's only in the edit pane. So hop back to edit. I wouldn't do that in Fairlight. I would be doing that in here. Ripple delete. Oh boy, scissor cut all of the audio. You see that? Be careful. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. So instead, I would be doing my refined editing for my sound in here. Like I don't need any of this, that stuff at the head, so I'm just gonna drag that out.
Walker, what a troubled soul.
So there, I might use my razor tool, cut, step forward a bit, cut, go back to my select tool, ripple delete.
Soul, born in the sand-drenched...
Cool. I think for now I'm going to leave it at that because that's a lot of information and this tutorial is coming up to an hour. Back to the Fairlight panel, I do want to say one more thing. Because I had added all of the effects to the entire clip first and listened to it all the way through and thought about quality, you'll notice that both of these clips now have the same effects. if you start to cut and then you start to do sound, you're going to have to copy and paste the properties to each one of the clips. And you do that simply by right-clicking, copy the clip, highlight the next clip, right-click, and paste attributes. And when you paste attributes, you can say, make it the same volume, add all the plugins and all the equalization. If you're not using equalizer, don't worry about it, and then hit apply. And then it'll paste down all of those attributes. So let's take a peek at the final product. I'm going to make the audio. This one here, I can delete it. I don't need you. So I'm going to delete this track. Best Star Wars music. I'm going to have that fade in as my video fades in from black. You always want to start your videos that way. And let's just see what that looks like. Okay. Oh, my dialogue is still soloed, meaning it's the only track that will play. So let me turn that off, rewind, and try that again.
Anakin Skywalker, what a troubled soul. Born in the sand-drenched shores of Tatooine, was told that his midichlorians were greater than any other Jedi in the history of the Jedi, and as a result, wanted to become a master. His master Obi-Wan Kenobi trained him well, but his hubris got to him, and in not too long, he was finding himself turning to the dark side.
And that, my friends, is an introduction to the Fairlight page. Happy sound editing.